Hello, everybody, and welcome to Eden Technologies webinars on the end of XP. My name is Terry Coyne, and I'm so glad that you could join us this afternoon. Before we get started, I just want to apologize to anyone who joined us yesterday. GoToWebinar was experiencing difficulties with their teleconferencing, so we felt it wasn't really valuable to do a webinar if you couldn't actually hear us. We couldn't even pantomime it for you because you couldn't have seen us. So we rescheduled for today, and we appreciate you joining us. And for those of you who couldn't make it yesterday and made it today, thank you so much for being here. This is a 30-minute webinar, so we're going to talk really fast just to get through the points. And we will be able to have questions at the end, so please feel free to post questions as we move through the deck. So the topic of this webinar is a topic that's on lots of people's minds. It's the end of XP. And at Eden Technologies, we're very well versed with what the impact can be with staying in XP, even if it's just a group of machines. And most organizations we're talking to, that's where they're at. They're not going to be completely in XP. They're going to have some kind of hybrid situation. We are an IT consultancy, and really one of our chief areas of expertise is the ability to work with organizations to manage their desktop migrations and then post-migration, manage their desktop environment, including even broader than that, network security and the whole landscape of IT. So we're really happy to be able to share what we have learned and what we're also engaged with our customers with figuring out with the XP end of support coming closer than we think. My name is Terry Coyne. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at Eden, and my background really is in IT communications. I have been in IT for over 20 years and have gone through a lot of desktop migrations as a project manager and managing the support and learning and communication side. With me today, I have Baker Hart. And Baker, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Terry. I'm Baker Hart. I'm one of the sales engineers here at Eden. And my background in terms of how it's applicable to the call today is I spent about 10 years in the Microsoft New York sales office supporting large customers like UPS and Sony and JetBlue and helped them with their desktops, specifically their XP environments at that time.
Great. Thanks, Baker. So I'm sure that I'm not saying anything at this point that everyone on the call doesn't already know. But Windows XP support ends, as everybody knows, next April. So that's less than 9 months from now, which seems like a long time, but it's really not. One of the things that you want to keep in mind with the end of support, what that actually means. And the biggest impact it's going to have is that there'll be no more patching for XP and no more support as Microsoft defines it. So do you want to talk a little bit about really what the end of support really means from Microsoft's perspective, Baker?
Absolutely. So Microsoft supports all of their enterprise software, and so XP definitely falls in that category, the desktop operating system. They support it for 10 years. So the first 5 years, they'll make any changes or bugs in the software, they'll fix free, and then the second 5 years, they'll only do security patches. Now, for XP, it's actually been more than 10 years. They've extended the end of support twice. So from all indications, they are not going to extend it again, so I think we are looking at a true deadline here. And the biggest impact will be that there will be no more security patches. So the OS, as far as Microsoft is concerned, will be retired and not supported in any way.
So for those organizations that are large in size and looking at possibly spending money for the custom support, you can get customer support for Microsoft on the slide up here. We kind of give you an idea of what the pricing of that could be. Some of the quotes have been up to $200 per machine. And again, That is more like responsive patching. If an issue is isolated, they will work on responding to it, but they will not be actively engaged in creating packages even for custom.
That's true. Even with those support contracts, the way that they are designed, the customer still has to request a specific patch. So the onus is still on you to track everything, even though you have an active support.
Which, as we all know, if you're asking for a patch, something that probably already happened.
Exactly. Usually not proactive.
Yeah, it's definitely not, gee, I think a patch for this might be a good idea. It's, oh my goodness, we need this patched immediately. And that just brings us to, I think everyone kind of has an idea of what the risks can be. But again, at a very fundamental, what you're looking at, if you're looking at this from a 10,000-foot view, is you're looking at the potential of having exposure with XP machines that you really don't want to have. These are machines that are not going to be actively patched. The vulnerabilities will be there, and if there's an easy way to get to those XP machines, those vulnerabilities can be exploited. So our sort of approach today, we're gonna knock through these top kind of 10 ways, is to kind of give you an idea of what you want to think about if you know you're going to have a group of machines in XP. We're just going to say this flat out. Best practice is to just get out of XP. That said, there's lots of valid reasons why organizations aren't going to get out. Most people we're talking to, as we said, are going to have a mixed environment. So our number one way to reduce your risk is make a plan. Make a plan, make a plan. And as you said earlier, Baker,
a bad plan is way better than no plan at all.
This is very true, and if you've worked in IT for a long time, we've worked on lots of bad plans.
Definitely, yes.
And when we talk about making a plan, we're not just talking about a plan to get to Windows 7, which you absolutely should have. You need to now seriously look at what is the plan and strategy around staying or keeping a certain group of machines in XP. This is critically important. The reason you're going to start to see as we move through. But first and foremost, make sure you have a good handle on what are the number of machines that you're going to keep in XP. Well, that takes us to number 2, which is, well, what are those machines? Where are they? What's deployed? And what are the work groups associated with those machines? One of the things you want to do is just admit we're not going to get there. Just come right out and admit it and work that into your planning phase with Windows 7. And just like you need to do for Windows 7, with, isolate your assets, know where your hardware assets are, also understand what your software situation is. Because keep in mind, it's not just XP that's going to end support. There's 60 other Microsoft applications that are ending support as well, and that's where you could also have some vulnerability issues. So know what is deployed and where, and start thinking about where are these machines and what are the business activities that would be associated with the machines that are left over. Which leads us to isolate XP machines. Can you explain a little bit, Baker, what we mean when we say that?
So the thought process behind this one is, okay, we know we've got customers that have critical business applications that are just not compatible, that have to stay on XP for right now. They have, for whatever reason, whether they're in-house or third party or whatever, they don't have a Windows 7 compatible version, so they have to have those users stay on XP. And this is, when we talk about isolating those machines, that's one way you can say, okay, I can leave these machines in my environment, but let's try to reduce the risk that those machines pose to the rest of the organization. And by isolating them, the number one thing that I mean is don't let them access the internet.
If you can help it.
If you can help it. Obviously, that's just not possible for certain work roles, or if you can give them another machine. In other words, isolate the XP machine, only let it access the line of business application that it needs to, and then give the user another machine for internet access or another way to get internet access if that's part of their role. So,
right.
So if this is practical, it's one option you can take. So the second So I put number 3 and number 4 really in the same bucket here, and that is, so let's assume that you know you're going to have these XP machines, critical users on them running critical applications, and they do have to have access to the internet. Another way that you can still reduce the risk of the organization is to put some type of solution on there that lets you know if anything has changed on the system. And that's essentially what an intrusion prevention solution does, is it'll tell you if any file changed. And if no file changed, the system hasn't been compromised, especially if it's restarting on a regular basis.
Right. So this is really looking at this at the machine level, and what can we do to have a better understanding of what's actually going on with those XP machines. The number 1 recommendation would be, if you can, isolate the machine. Try not to have that machine interacting with, as much as possible, with any machine that has access out to the internet. May not be easy to do. The next thing then would be to consider at least monitoring that machine, doing some host intrusion prevention. Okay, this seems obvious, but we're just going to say it. Get more vigilant about your patching. And the reason, again, is what you want to make sure is when this end of XP support happens, you're at least patched up until the last patch release. And a lot of organizations aren't as up to speed on the patching as possible. So at least in going back to item number 1, with your make a plan, make sure that you have an item in your plan to make sure any machines you leave in XP are patched up into the last patch. It just makes sense, but we need to say it. And
the only thing I was going to add here, Terry, was that, okay, yes, patch XP, but don't forget there are a number of other applications that sit on these machines. I was just reading yesterday that both at Adobe and J2EE, so the jobs development platform, are responsible for like 80% of the vulnerabilities that are out in the market now. So that's much worse than XP is currently in terms of vulnerabilities. So if you could just get XP patched and those patched, you're probably much safer off.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is something that people don't realize. It's something that everyone should be doing better. But this is, if you have a hard time making the case for the resource allocation to be more vigilant in your patching, this might be a good argument to make around leaving some machines in XP. This one is a little more cost intensive. Secure your network. But again, this goes back to what you're looking to do is to shore up any possibility of anything being able to come through your network and take advantage of any of those vulnerabilities that may exist on your XP machine.
I would say this is a core part of defense in depth. So the whole thing around securing any enterprises, you want to have a lot of different ways that you are securing your data and your systems, and this is just another one of them. So if you're worried about the vulnerabilities of XP, another way to reduce the chance of those machines becoming compromised is just to make sure every other part of your defense in depth is working.
Right. And this also goes back to being strategic about, if you can be strategic about what machines you're leaving in XP, be strategic about it. So if there's a work group that they don't have a lot, their business processes are not internet intensive, they're not working on critical business applications, perhaps you can isolate that group. You may not be able to isolate that group from the internet, but you may be able to isolate, shore up the access to that particular group. So you don't have to look at this from a global perspective. You can actually look at this more strategically and say, okay, well, any access into this particular area of our network needs to absolutely have a extra layer of security. Which goes, one thing that you probably would ultimately not want to do is have dribs and drabs of XP machines across different business units. You may not be able to control that, but if you can, the better that you can kind of zero in on these different clusters, the more you can actually do to shore it up. And again, this touches to the same point. This now is about what kind of data activity is going on.
Yeah, this is definitely just another part of defense in depth. You know, I want to secure every part of the environment that I can, both independently and together, because the goal is, how do I keep myself from being compromised? How do I make sure that the critical data stays safe, or at least in known places?
Right.
And DLP is a perfect example of that.
One of the examples that you brought up in our discussions is, you know, you really ultimately might not want to have a machine left in XP that's managing all of the critical Social Security numbers or bank account information. That probably wouldn't be the best strategy. And if there's no way around that, again, you want to look at, do they need to have an internet access? Or like your point, can you just leave that one machine to do that one critical business task and then not have any other activity coming out of there? Again, it's not as simple as we're just not going to get done. It's, okay, we know we're not going to get done. What are the areas that we really have to focus on? And this is a big one. Okay, let's talk about big ones. This one can actually could be impactful to the remaining XP users.
You know, this is an interesting one because it's kind of risky, and it's risky mostly because this is when Microsoft released Vista, they tightened down the OS significantly. Vista and Windows 7, and that was one of the big benefits of them. XP really wasn't designed, most of the applications that were written for XP were designed with the thought in mind that the local user would have admin access. So when you go back and, you know, most companies are still on XP, or those users are going to be still on XP because they've got an application that will only run there, there's a good chance that this is not going to work. But if it does work, great, you just, again, reduced your the risk of that machine getting compromised if you can get away with this. But if you can't, you can't.
Right. At the very least, if you have admin passwords that aren't that secure, you might also want to just consider just changing maybe from admin. You know, a lot of people, their admin passwords.
Or
password.
Seems to be a popular one, yeah. Or,
yeah.
You know, but there's a whole lot of strategies about how to manage administrative access to a workstation. But to me, this suggestion is not just how do I make sure that the administrative account is locked down. This is, to me, is more the end user. If the end user, because it's the user that'll get compromised if they're going to get compromised, and if they don't have administrative access to that box, it just lowers the risk of that box getting corrupted.
Absolutely, and again, it's also understanding there's a reason why people have this level of access, and how is that going to impact the business processes they have to do on those XP machines. And which leads us to number 9, educate and communicate. And this is really one of those situations where you need to kind of educate and communicate up and down the business chain, starting with your key stakeholders. Obviously, there are real business reasons why you are not going to be able to get completely out of XP, and some of those are budgetary reasons. But don't assume that staying in XP is coming without a cost. Once you've gone through these different elements and assess what you feel you're comfortable with your level of exposure is, there may be some costs associated with possibly getting some extra resources to actively update your patching, or to secure some of your network elements, or to actually just do the research into figuring out which are the best groups to leave in XP. So in order to get that kind of budgetary approval, you need to start that process of educating the stakeholders. This is the impact of leaving our machines in XP, and these are some of the remediation efforts we'd like to take around those machines. Also, to your point, Baker, too, about some of these adjustments will actually impact the way users are working. If we are changing admin rights, if that's going to potentially impact, or testing needs to happen, users need to be educated as to why these things are going on.
I'd say anytime you're going to try and do isolation is one of your techniques, anytime you're going to try and put some type of intrusion prevention or intrusion detection on there, that could have a user impact or an impact on performance. any of those, the admin rights is probably most likely to have the most significant impact on the end user. But if you're using any of those, well, let me take a step back. If you're doing anything that impacts the user experience on that workstation and you don't communicate it to them, you'll be losing a toe.
Yeah, it's not a good idea to not communicate. The other piece of this is once you understand what steps you're going to take with those XP machines, that needs to be incorporated into your overall plan. So unfortunately, where a lot of companies are going to be at is they're going to be in the midst of their Windows 7 migration in some fashion. Most people we've spoken to, they're going to be started. They're not going to just be starting. So they're going to be in this mixed environment. Don't exclude the communication efforts to the XP users. In your effort to kind of push people into Windows 7, the users that are going to remain in XP for whatever length of time need to be communicated to if adjustments have been made to their work environment. Can't stress this one enough. And number 10 is consider just doing an XP assessment. And this is one of those things that you can do as a group. Get your key stakeholders together, get some people from network ops, security ops, your desktop group, and just get in a room and start kind of brainstorming. You know your environment better than anybody does, and thinking about, well, what could the potential exposures be? If you want additional help with that, or if you need guidance around that, we've been working with our customers doing this for the past couple of months, just trying to get those things incorporated into their overall migration plan around Windows 7. But again, don't forget that once you do that level of assessment, you want to come up with your series of recommendations, and then you want to kind of push that up the food chain with your key stakeholders and associate some budgetary costs if you need to get extra approval for any additional costs. The other thing this assessment will let you do is it'll let you see what's the cost of staying and what's the cost of possibly accelerating the migration a little bit faster. Some of you will not be able to accelerate any faster than you're already doing, but some of you may. You know, especially if you're at the early stages, you may be able to crunch the numbers and say, if we do 2 more migrations a day, starting in August or September, we could actually really reduce the effort we would have to take to manage the remaining XP machines. Again, it really does go back to one, make a plan, understand the plan, don't ignore the impact of XP. Baker, any other thoughts? We've got about 6 minutes. If anyone has questions, please post them up now. But any kind of additional thoughts around this?
Just one. So we were talking about isolating the machines, and I was thinking about we do have a customer that's done that successfully, but still the users had internet access, and they did that by actually letting the users. They couldn't hit the internet from their system, but they could log into a Citrix session and then launch a browser that way. And that both preserved the security of the XP desktop, but gave the user, without having to give them 2 machines, a browser and out to the internet.
And actually, if you have any Citrix environment at all, which many organizations do, that's a really nice way of not highly impacting the user, but like you said, just kind of keeping the actual XP, any activity going on that desktop out of it. Yeah, and I think there's a number of kind of creative solutions like that. Once you figure out, okay, this is what we got to do. These are the groups that are going to be impacted. What do we have to do? If you kind of go through this list, you can kind of come up with some. You don't have to spend a ton of money. Sometimes you just have to think it through. The only other thing I would add to that is please, please, please make sure you test whatever it is you decide you're doing or want to do with these remaining XP machines. Do it in advance of the end of support and test. especially like you mentioned earlier, with tools like intrusion, prevention tools, sometimes there is an impact. You don't know what it is, and there's tweaking that has to happen. You really don't want to be spending all your time in April not only instituting these things, but then figuring out and fixing and tweaking. Try to do that as far in advance as you can. I think we talked pretty fast. I have to say, I have a question here. Hang on. This is a long question, so give me 1 second. The question is, you've given me some good ideas for the single XP machine that we need to keep around to support a legacy app which does not work on Win 7 and won't even work inside an XP VM under Windows 7. Thanks.
Oh, good.
Well, that's not a question, that's a compliment. And how often do you
We've earned our pay for the day.
Yeah, again, if any of you have those kinds of unique situations, please feel free to reach out to us. I mean, like Baker's saying, we're talking to customers every day, kind of helping them. And we may have worked with someone who's figured out an easy solution. So don't be shy about reaching out to us about stuff like that, because it's just a lot of things to keep in mind at the same time. Just for any of you that aren't familiar with Eden, we've got some links up here. We're also recording the webinar, and we'll send you a link to that if you want anyone else to listen to it. It's only a half an hour. We'll also send you a copy of the deck if you want. We'll send you a thank you email, and if you want a copy of the deck, we're happy to send it along to you. We don't have any other questions at the moment, and we have like a minute to spare, so I guess our next webinar could be 29 minutes.
There you go. A new goal.
Right, exactly. Again, please feel free to reach out either to myself or to Baker or to Steve Schimmel, who will be sending you, or someone else from Eden will be sending you an email with any of your questions or concerns. And thank you so much for your patience yesterday, and hope to hear from you soon. And thank you so much, Baker, for your insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry. I think this worked well.
Yeah, thank you, and get back to work, everybody. Thanks. Goodbye.